The Christmas Eve Express. The platform was nearly empty when I arrived. I had expected something different, I suppose. Christmas Eve at a train station should feel crowded, I thought, rushed, full of the anxious energy of people trying to reach their destinations before the holiday truly began. But instead, there was only the cold December air, the overhead lights casting pale yellow pools across the concrete, and perhaps 5 or 6 other travelers scattered along the length of the platform, each standing apart from the others, wrapped in their own coats and their own thoughts. I checked my ticket again, even though I had already checked it 3 times in the taxi. Platform 7, the Christmas Eve Express to the northern cities. Departure at 9 in the evening, arrival at 7 the following morning. 10 hours through the winter darkness, cutting across the frozen countryside while the rest of the world gathered around their trees and their fireplaces. I had not planned to spend Christmas Eve this way, but plans change as they do, and I found myself with a ticket in hand and a small overnight bag at my feet, standing on platform 7, watching the lights of the city glitter in the distance beyond the station's steel and glass ceiling. A man in a dark coat stood 50 feet away, reading something on his phone. A young woman sat on a bench farther down, her hands wrapped around a paper cup of what I imagined was coffee or tea. An older couple stood together, speaking in low voices, their words lost in the vastness of the station. We were islands, all of us, separate and silent. And then I heard it, the deep, low sound of the train approaching. Not the shriek of a whistle or the grinding screech of brakes, but something softer. A kind of mechanical breathing, a presence arriving from elsewhere. I turned toward the sound and saw it emerging from the darkness beyond the platform's edge. The train was long, longer than I had imagined. A string of cars painted in deep forest green with gold lettering along the sides that caught the light as it rolled slowly past. The windows glowed from within, warm and golden, each one a small rectangle of light against the night. It moved with a stately, unhurried grace, as though it had all the time in the world, as though the darkness and the cold and the late hour were nothing to it. I watched the locomotive slide past, then the first few cars. Through the windows, I could see the interiors, plush seats in burgundy fabric, polished wood paneling, brass fixtures that gleamed. The train looked like something from another era, something that had survived intact from a time when travel itself was considered an art form. The train slowed and then stopped. The doors opened with a soft hydraulic sigh. I picked up my bag and boarded. The conductor stood just inside the door, an older man with silver hair and a uniform that looked freshly pressed despite the late hour. His face was kind, creased with lines that suggested he smiled often. "Good evening," he said, and his voice was warm. "Welcome aboard the Christmas Eve Express." I handed him my ticket. He studied it for a moment, then nodded. "Cabin 12, he said. "Third car forward, left-hand side. It's all ready for you." He gestured down the corridor. "We'll be departing in just a few moments. Please make yourself comfortable." "Thank you," I said. He smiled again, a knowing sort of smile. "You picked a special night to travel," he said. "Merry Christmas." I moved down the narrow corridor. The carpet beneath my feet was thick and patterned with an intricate design of vines and flowers. The walls were paneled in rich, dark wood. Small brass lamps were mounted at intervals, their light soft and golden. Everything gleamed with care, with attention. This was a train that had been loved. I passed 1 cabin, 2, 3. Through their windows, I could see that most were empty. Only a few showed signs of occupancy, a coat hung on a hook, a book resting on a seat. The train was as quiet inside as the platform had been outside. Almost empty. Almost mine. I found cabin 12 and slid the door open. It was small but perfect. A single seat upholstered in deep green velvet sat beneath the window, which took up most of one wall and offered a view of the platform outside. A reading lamp arched gracefully over the seat, its brass arm polished to a glow. Opposite the seat was a narrow sleeping berth, already made up with crisp white linens and a thick wool blanket folded at the foot. Above it, a small shelf held a few books, classic volumes, their spines worn soft with age. There was a tiny table that folded down from the wall, and on it sat a thermos of hot water, a selection of teas in a wooden box. and a single white mug. Everything I might need, nothing more. I set my bag down and closed the door behind me. The sound of it sliding shut was satisfying, final. I was enclosed now, safe. The world outside could carry on without me for these 10 hours. I had permission to simply be here, in this small, perfect space, as the train carried me north through the winter night. I took off my coat and hung it on the small brass hook by the door. Then I sat down in the green velvet seat and looked out the window. The platform was still mostly empty. The conductor had boarded now. The doors had closed. I heard a whistle, 2 short notes, clear and bright, and then, with barely any sensation of movement at all, the train began to slide forward. We left the station slowly, almost reluctantly. The lights of the platform fell away behind us. The steel and glass ceiling disappeared, and we were out in the open night. The city spread around us for a moment, buildings lit from within, streets lined with Christmas decorations, the distant spires of churches picked out in white lights against the dark sky. And then the city began to fade. We moved through the outskirts, past warehouses and industrial buildings, past neighborhoods where the houses grew smaller and farther apart. I watched it all slide by the window, and I felt something in my chest begin to loosen. The tightness I had been carrying, the small anxiety of travel and timing and expectations, all of it began to ease. The train rocked gently beneath me. The motion was soothing, rhythmic. I had not realized how tired I was until this moment. Sitting here in the warm cabin with the cold night outside and the train carrying me forward into the darkness. I reached for the thermos and poured myself a cup of tea. Chamomile, I thought, though I did not check the label. The steam rose from the mug, and I cupped my hands around it, letting the warmth seep into my palms. Outside, the last of the city lights disappeared, and we entered the countryside. It was full night now. The sky above was deep and clear, scattered with stars. The land around us was covered in snow. I could see it in the moonlight, smooth and unbroken, stretching away on either side of the tracks. The fields were empty, the trees dark shapes against the white. We were moving into the silence now, into the winter, into the space between where I had been and where I was going. And as I sat there, sipping my tea and watching the darkness slide past my window, I realized something. I was not in a hurry to arrive. The cabin was warm, not the sharp, dry heat of forced air, but something gentler, a kind of ambient warmth that seemed to come from everywhere at once, from the floor beneath my feet, from the walls around me, from the reading lamp glowing beside my seat. It was the warmth of something well insulated, something designed to hold the cold at bay without effort or noise. I took another sip of my tea and set the mug down on the small folding table. Then I leaned back in the green velvet seat and simply looked. The cabin was beautiful in the way that small, well-made things are beautiful. Everything had its place. Everything fit. The reading lamp curved just so, at exactly the right height and angle. The table folded down perfectly flush against the wall when not in use. The sleeping berth above was narrow, yes, but long enough, and the linens looked soft and inviting. Even the window seemed perfectly proportioned, large enough to offer a full view of the passing landscape, but not so large as to feel exposed. There was a rhythm to it all, a sense of intention. Someone had designed this space with care, had thought about the person who would sit here on a winter night, tired from travel, seeking comfort and quiet. And now I was that person, and the cabin cradled me the way it was meant to. I reached up and adjusted the reading lamp, angling it away from the window so that its light would not reflect against the glass. I wanted to see outside clearly, without my own face staring back at me. The view was mesmerizing. We were fully in the countryside now, miles beyond the last scattered suburbs. The land on either side of the tracks was wide and open, farm fields, I thought, though I could see no houses, no signs of habitation. Just the snow, white and smooth under the moonlight, and the dark line of trees in the distance marking the edges of the fields. The moon was nearly full. It hung low in the sky ahead of us, bright and clear, and its light transformed everything. The snow looked almost blue in that light, pale blue shading into violet in the places where the shadows fell. Every once in a while, we would pass a fence line, the posts marching away into the distance, each one topped with a small cap of snow. It was a world of contrasts. The gold of my cabin, warm and glowing. The blue-silver of the landscape outside, cold and vast and still. I sat between them, neither here nor there, suspended in this small space that was moving through the night. And beneath it all, constant and unchanging, was the sound of the wheels. Clickety-clack, clickety-clack. It was a sound I had heard before, of course. Everyone has heard that sound, the sound of a train moving over tracks. But I had never really listened to it until now. I had always dismissed it as background noise, something to ignore or tune out. But here, in the quiet of the cabin with nothing else to distract me, I heard it fully for the first time. It was rhythmic, perfectly rhythmic, each wheel passing over each joint in the rails, creating a steady, repeating pattern that never varied, never faltered. Clickety-clack, clickety-clack, clickety-clack. On and on and on, mile after mile. But there was more to it than just the wheels. Beneath that higher, sharper sound was a deeper hum. The sound of the train itself, the engine pulling us forward, the vibration of motion traveling back through every car. It was a low, thrumming note that I felt more than heard, something that resonated in my chest and in my bones. And behind that, softer still, was the whisper of air against the windows, the faint creak of the car's frame as it swayed gently on the tracks, the distant hiss of steam or hydraulics or whatever it was that kept this machine alive and moving. All of it together created a kind of symphony, a mechanical lullaby. It surrounded me, enclosed me, became the background against which every other sound and sensation existed. I closed my eyes for a moment and just listened. Clickety-clack, clickety-clack, the low hum beneath, the whisper above. It was soothing. Deeply, profoundly soothing in a way I had not expected. My breathing slowed to match the rhythm. My shoulders, which I had not realized were tense, began to relax. The tightness in my jaw eased. I opened my eyes again and looked out at the passing snow, and I felt something I had not felt in a long time. Peace. Not the peace of having arrived somewhere safe. Not the peace of completion or achievement, or the satisfaction of a task finished. But the peace of simply being in motion. The peace of the journey itself. I was going somewhere, yes. But I was also nowhere. I was between. I was suspended in time and space, held gently by this train, carried forward through the darkness with no effort on my part, no decisions to make. Nothing required of me except to sit here and watch and listen and be. It was a gift, I realized. This night, this train, this small warm cabin with its green velvet seat and its golden light and its perfect window onto the winter world. I settled deeper into the seat, pulling my legs up beneath me, wrapping my hands around the now cooling mug of tea. Outside, the landscape continued to slide past. A farmhouse appeared in the distance, its windows dark, its chimney trailing a thin line of smoke into the night sky. Then it was gone, and there was only snow again, and trees, and the moon hanging bright and steady above it all. The train rocked me gently. The wheels sang their song. And I sat in my warm cabin, surrounded by golden light, watching the cold world pass by, and I felt more at home than I had felt in months. Time moved differently on the train. I could not say how long I had been sitting there, watching the snow and listening to the wheels. It might have been 20 minutes, it might have been an hour. The usual markers of time seemed to have loosened their grip. There was no clock in the cabin that I could see, and I had deliberately left my phone in my bag, tucked away and silenced. I did not want to know what time it was. I did not want the intrusion of messages or notifications, or the small anxieties of the outside world. Here, there was only the rhythm. Clickety-clack, clickety-clack, clickety-clack. It had become almost hypnotic now, that sound. My entire awareness seemed to have narrowed to it, to the steady, unchanging beat of the wheels on the rails. It was like a heartbeat, like breathing, like the tide, something ancient and primal and reassuring in its constancy. I found myself counting the beats without meaning to. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And beneath it, the deeper hum, the low thrumming vibration that rose up through the floor and through the seat and through my body. It was as though the train had a pulse, and I was inside it, part of it, my own rhythm synchronizing with its rhythm. And then, cutting through it all, I heard the whistle. It came from far ahead, from the locomotive at the front of the train. A long, low note that rose and fell, mournful and beautiful, echoing out across the empty fields. It was a sound that spoke of distance and solitude and the vastness of the night. A sound that said, I am here, I am passing through, I am alone in the darkness, and I sing so that you will know. I smiled without realizing I was smiling. There was something wonderful about that whistle, something that touched a place deep inside me that I had forgotten existed. It was lonely, yes, but not in a sad way. It was the loneliness of a thing that is content with itself, that does not need company to feel whole. The whistle faded, and the clickety-clack returned, steady as ever. I shifted in my seat and looked down the length of the corridor outside my cabin door. Through the small window in the door, I could see the narrow hallway, empty and quiet, the brass lamps glowing softly along its length. Every few moments, the train would sway gently on the tracks, and the light would shift, creating shadows that moved and danced along the wood-paneled walls. As I watched, a figure appeared at the far end of the corridor. The conductor. He was walking slowly from cabin to cabin, checking on passengers, making sure everyone was comfortable. I watched him stop at one door, knock gently, exchange a few words with whoever was inside. Then he moved on to the next. Eventually, he reached my door and knocked. 2 soft taps. I slid the door open. "Good evening," he said again, exactly as he had said it when I boarded. His voice was warm and unhurried, as though he had all the time in the world. "Just checking to make sure you have everything you need. Is the cabin comfortable?" "Very comfortable," I said. "Thank you." He nodded, satisfied. "We'll be making a brief stop in about an hour," he said. "Just a water stop, nothing to worry about. You won't need to get off unless you'd like to stretch your legs. After that, straight through to morning." "Thank you," I said again. He smiled. "The dining car is open until 11 if you'd like a late supper. 2 cars forward, just follow the corridor." I had not thought about food, but as soon as he mentioned it, I realized I was hungry. "I might do that," I said. "Take your time," he said. "No rush. We're not going anywhere but forward." He touched the brim of his cap in a small salute and moved on to the next cabin. I watched him go, his figure swaying slightly with the motion of the train, perfectly balanced, perfectly at ease. He had been doing this a long time, I thought. He knew these trains the way a sailor knows the sea. He understood the rhythm, the motion, the particular quality of time that existed here. I closed the door again and stood for a moment, considering. The dining car, a late supper. Why not? I was hungry, yes, but more than that, I was curious. I wanted to see more of this train, to explore it, to understand the full extent of this small world I had entered. I pulled on my sweater. The cabin was warm, but the corridors might be cooler, and stepped out into the hallway. The carpet muffled my footsteps as I walked forward, passing cabin after cabin. Most of them were dark, their curtains drawn. 1 or 2 showed light behind the glass, and I caught brief glimpses of other passengers. A man reading a book, a woman resting with her eyes closed, a child's face pressed against a window. We were all here together, and yet utterly separate, each of us in our own small world, carried together through the night. The corridor swayed gently beneath my feet. I put one hand against the wood-paneled wall to steady myself, and I felt the vibration of the train through my palm. The rhythm was everywhere. It was inescapable. Clickety-clack, clickety-clack, clickety-clack. I passed through one car, then another. The doors between the cars opened with a soft whoosh of air, and for a moment I stood in the small vestibule between them, feeling the cold night air leaking in around the edges. The sound here was louder. The wheels, the rails, the wind. It was almost overwhelming. And then I pushed through the next door, and the warmth and quiet returned. At last, I reached the dining car. I slid the door open and stepped inside, and I stopped. It was beautiful. The dining car was long and narrow, lined on both sides with tables set for 2 or 4. Each table was covered with a crisp white linen cloth and set with real china, real silverware, real glassware that caught the light from the small brass lamps mounted on the walls. In the center of each table was a single white candle in a glass holder, burning steadily despite the motion of the train. The walls were the same rich, dark wood as the rest of the train, polished to a deep glow. The windows were large, offering a full view of the moonlit landscape rushing past outside. At the far end of the car was a small bar area, and behind it, I could see into the galley where the kitchen staff worked. And the dining car was almost empty. There were perhaps 4 other people scattered among the tables, a couple near the middle of the car, dining in companionable silence. A man by himself near the window, reading something while he ate. Another person at the far end, their back to me. That was all. The maitre d' appeared at my elbow so smoothly and silently that I almost jumped. He was a tall, slender man in a crisp white jacket, his hair perfectly combed, his manner exquisitely formal. "Good evening," he said, and his voice had the same warmth as the conductor's, the same unhurried quality. "Will you be dining with us tonight?" "Yes," I said, "just myself." "Of course. Right this way." He led me to a table by the window, midway down the car. He pulled out the chair with a flourish, shook out the napkin and placed it in my lap with a deft gesture, and handed me a menu printed on heavy cardstock. "May I bring you something to drink?" he asked. "Just water, please." "Of course. Take your time with the menu. I'll return shortly." He glided away, and I was alone at my table. I looked around the dining car again, taking it all in. The absurdity of it struck me suddenly, and I had to suppress a smile. Here we were, 5 people in a dining car designed to seat perhaps 50. 5 people scattered among all these perfectly set tables, all this gleaming silver and fine china, all this careful formality. The maitre d' in his white jacket moving between us with the same precision and grace he would have shown if the car had been packed full, the candles burning on every table, even the empty ones. The soft music playing from somewhere. Classical, something by Debussy, I thought, drifting through the nearly empty space. It was absurd. Wonderfully, charmingly absurd. And yet, there was something moving about it too. The care that had gone into this. The refusal to let the emptiness diminish the experience. The dedication to doing it right, to maintaining the tradition and the ceremony, even for just 5 people on a quiet Christmas Eve. I looked down at the menu. It was surprisingly extensive. Appetizers, soups, salads, entrees, desserts. Everything prepared fresh in that small galley kitchen, served with pride despite the tiny audience. The maitre d' returned with my water, poured from a crystal pitcher into a real glass. "Have you decided?" he asked. "The soup to start," I said. "And then the roasted chicken, please." "Excellent choice. And perhaps a side of the roasted vegetables?" "Yes, thank you." He took the menu and disappeared toward the kitchen. I sipped my water and looked out the window. The landscape had changed slightly. We were in more wooded country now, the trees pressing closer to the tracks. Their branches were bare and delicate against the snow, creating intricate patterns that flickered past in the moonlight. Every so often, we would cross a small bridge, and I would catch a glimpse of dark water moving beneath the ice. The soup arrived, brought by a young waiter who moved with the same careful grace as the maitre d'. It was a simple soup, I think, some kind of vegetable broth, but it was hot and flavorful, and I ate it slowly, savoring each spoonful, in no hurry to finish. The couple at the other table were speaking quietly to one another, their voices too low for me to hear the words. The man by the window had set his book aside and was also eating soup, gazing out at the passing night. At the far end of the car, the other person had turned slightly, and I could see now that it was an elderly woman, dining alone, her movements slow and deliberate as she lifted her spoon to her lips. We were all alone together, separate but united by this shared experience, this strange, beautiful Christmas Eve on this nearly empty train. My chicken arrived, perfectly roasted, the skin golden and crisp, served with vegetables that still had their color and their texture. I cut into it, and the steam rose, fragrant and delicious. As I ate, the conductor's voice came over the intercom system. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, and his voice filled the dining car, warm and slightly amplified. "This is your conductor speaking. We are currently traveling through the Willow Creek Valley, and if you look out the windows on the right side of the train, you may catch a glimpse of the old stone bridge that was built in 1892. It's lit up tonight for the holiday. Keep your eyes open." There was a pause, and then he added, almost as an afterthought, "We hope you're enjoying your evening aboard the Christmas Eve Express. Merry Christmas to all." I smiled at the formality of it, the careful announcement made to this near-empty train. It was charming. It was perfect. I looked out the window on the right side, and sure enough, a moment later, I saw the bridge. It was beautiful, illuminated by soft lights that picked out the stones of its arch, spanning a frozen creek far below. And then it was gone, vanished into the darkness behind us. The maitre d' appeared at my table again. "How is everything?" "Perfect," I said, and I meant it. I finished my meal slowly, in no rush at all. There was dessert, a simple vanilla panna cotta with berries, and then coffee, strong and hot. By the time I was done, one of the other diners had left, and the couple had moved to the bar area, where they sat side by side on the tall stools, speaking in low voices over glasses of wine. I paid for my meal. The prices were surprisingly reasonable, another small kindness, and thanked the maitre d' and the waiter. They both nodded graciously, as though I had been one of 100 guests rather than one of 5. Then I made my way back through the train, through the swaying corridors and the quiet darkened cars, back to my cabin. The window in my cabin showed me that the landscape had changed again while I was dining. We were climbing now, moving into higher country. The fields had given way to hills, and the hills were covered in dense forest, the trees crowding close to the tracks. The moon was higher in the sky now, smaller and brighter, and its light filtered down through the bare branches to create shifting patterns on the snow below. I settled back into my green velvet seat and pulled the wool blanket from the sleeping berth, draping it over my legs. The cabin was still perfectly warm, but the blanket added another layer of comfort, of coziness. I sat there for a long time, just watching the trees slide past, listening to the wheels. Clickety-clack, clickety-clack. The rhythm was a comfort now, familiar and reassuring. I found that I could predict each beat, could anticipate the slight acceleration or slowing as we climbed or descended. The train was teaching me its language, its patterns. After a while, I heard the conductor's voice again on the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your conductor speaking." His voice was as warm and unhurried as ever. "We are now entering the Northern Highlands. We'll be traveling through some beautiful country over the next few hours, so if you're still awake, I encourage you to keep your curtains open and enjoy the view. The next scheduled announcement will be at 6 a.m., when we begin our approach to the city. Until then, please don't hesitate to call if you need anything. The call button is just above your seat. Have a peaceful night, everyone. Merry Christmas." I smiled at the intercom speaker mounted near the ceiling. The formality of these announcements to this nearly empty train continued to delight me. I could picture him in the conductor's compartment reading from a script, or perhaps just speaking from decades of habit, addressing the 5 or 6 of us scattered through these cars as though we were a full train of hundreds. But there was affection in his voice, a kind of gentle humor, as though he knew exactly how absurd it was and loved it all the more for that reason. I reached up and adjusted the reading lamp, angling it so that it cast only the faintest glow, enough to see by without creating glare on the window. Then I settled deeper into my seat, pulled the blanket higher, and gave myself over completely to the journey. The hours passed. I watched the landscape change and change again. The hills grew steeper, the valleys deeper. We crossed bridges and trestles, the train slowing slightly as the wheels rumbled over wooden ties. Small streams appeared below us, black water moving between white banks. Once, we passed through a town so small it was barely there, a cluster of houses around a church, all dark except for the colored lights strung along the eaves, reflecting on the snow. The moon traced its arc across the sky. The stars wheeled slowly overhead, and through it all, constant and unchanging, was the sound of the train. Clickety-clack, clickety-clack. I felt myself begin to drift. Not quite sleeping, but not quite awake either. A state somewhere in between, peaceful and unfocused. My thoughts wandered without direction. Memories surfaced and dissolved. I thought about other journeys I had taken, other times I had been in motion. I thought about the places I had been and the places I was going. I thought about home and what that word meant, and whether home was always a place or sometimes a feeling, sometimes a moment. And gradually, without my quite realizing it was happening, I understood something. I understood why this night felt so different, why this journey felt like a gift. It was because, for the first time in months, I was not racing towards something or running from something. I was not anxious about arriving or guilty about leaving. I was simply here, in this small cabin, in this moving train, suspended between departure and arrival, held in the space between. This was a liminal space, I thought, a threshold, a place of transition, and there was something sacred about it, something that our normal lives rarely gave us permission to experience. We spend so much of our lives focused on destinations, on getting there, on arriving, on checking off boxes and reaching goals. We think of journeys as necessary inconveniences, as the price we pay to reach the places we really want to be. We are impatient with the in-between. We want to skip ahead, to arrive already arrived. But what if the in-between was where we were supposed to be? What if the journey was the point? Here, on this train, I was nowhere. I had left one place behind, and I had not yet reached the next. I was in transit, in motion, in passage. I was between, and I was at peace. Because here, in this liminal space, I had no responsibilities, no decisions to make, no expectations to meet. The train was carrying me forward, and all I had to do was be here, in this warm cabin, watching the snow and the moonlight, listening to the wheels. I did not have to be anywhere else. I did not have to be anyone else. I could simply be present in this moment, this place, this quiet in-between. It was a kind of freedom I had forgotten existed. I closed my eyes and listened to the rhythm. Clickety-clack, clickety-clack. And I felt a gratitude rising in my chest, unexpected and profound. Gratitude for this night, for this train, for the conductor who made his formal announcements to the empty cars, for the maitre d' who served 5 people with the same care he would have shown to 50, for the warm cabin and the green velvet seat and the window that opened onto the winter world. Gratitude for being here, now, in this perfect space between. The train rolled on through the darkness, carrying me forward, and I let it carry me. I let go of everything else and simply allowed myself to be held by this moment, cradled by the motion and the rhythm and the gentle, constant sound of the wheels on the rails. Outside, the moonlight turned the snow into something luminous, something that seemed to glow from within. The trees cast long shadows across the white fields. The world was vast and silent and beautiful, and I was moving through it, warm and safe, wrapped in wool and golden light. I must have dozed at some point, because when I opened my eyes again, the landscape had changed once more. We were descending now, coming down out of the highlands. The trees had thinned, and I could see fields again, wide and open under the stars. In the distance, very faint, I thought I could see the glow of a town or city on the horizon, but we were not close yet. Not nearly close. I checked the small clock I finally noticed on the shelf above the sleeping berth. It was just past midnight. Christmas Day had arrived while I drifted. The world had crossed from one day to the next, and I had been here, suspended, watching snow and moonlight, listening to the wheels. Merry Christmas, I thought to myself. Merry Christmas to this train, and to the few of us riding through the darkness together. The train swayed gently beneath me, and I pulled the blanket closer. My body was relaxed in a way it had not been in months. My mind was quiet. The anxieties that usually circled endlessly, about work, about relationships, about time running out and things left undone, all of them had faded into the background, become distant and unimportant. Here, in this moving space, time worked differently. The past was behind me, falling away with every mile. The future was ahead, waiting but not pressing. And the present, this moment right now, was enough. It was everything. I thought about the lesson in all of this, the understanding that had been growing in me all night, the realization that peace was not always about arriving, about reaching some destination where everything would finally be okay. Sometimes peace was about accepting the journey itself, about finding the courage to be in the in-between, the not yet, the still becoming. Life was full of these liminal spaces, I thought, transitions and thresholds. Times when we were neither here nor there, when we were in the process of changing or moving or becoming something new. And so often we resisted those times. We saw them as uncomfortable, as something to get through as quickly as possible. We wanted certainty. We wanted arrival. But what if we could learn to be comfortable in the uncertainty? What if we could find the peace that existed in the journey itself, in the motion and the rhythm and the slow unfolding of distance? What if home was not always a place, but sometimes a feeling? And what if that feeling could be found here, in this small cabin on a nearly empty train, rolling through the winter darkness on Christmas Eve? I looked out at the moonlit landscape, at the endless snow and the dark trees and the huge, silent sky, and I felt it. I felt home. Not because I had arrived anywhere, but because I was here, now, present and awake and alive in this perfect moment. The train was my home tonight. This small, warm cabin with its green velvet seat and its golden light. The rhythm of the wheels was my heartbeat. The motion of the journey was my breath. I was exactly where I needed to be. The deepest part of the night arrived with a stillness that felt almost sacred. It must have been 2 or 3 in the morning, though I had stopped checking the clock. Time had become irrelevant, marked only by the unchanging rhythm of the wheels and the slow rotation of the moon across the sky. The train had leveled out now, rolling smoothly across what seemed to be a vast, flat plain. The fields on either side stretched away forever, unbroken white under the stars. There were no towns visible, no houses, no lights anywhere except for the moon and the stars and the soft golden glow from the train itself. I had dimmed the reading lamp even further, until it was barely more than a whisper of light, just enough to give shape to the cabin's interior without overwhelming the view outside. The result was that I seemed to be floating in a pool of warm amber, surrounded on all sides by the cold blue silver of the winter night. The contrast was beautiful, hypnotic. I felt like I was in a snow globe, or in some kind of dream, or perhaps in a painting that someone had made of the ideal winter journey. Everything was perfect in its composition. Everything was exactly as it should be. The other passengers on the train were surely asleep by now. I had not heard footsteps in the corridor for hours, had not heard any doors opening or closing. Even the conductor had grown quiet, making no more announcements, letting us all drift through the night in peace. I was alone with the landscape and the rhythm. Clickety-clack, clickety-clack, clickety-clack. The sound was inside me now, I realized. It had become part of my internal landscape, part of the fabric of my awareness. I could not imagine silence anymore. I could not imagine stillness. The motion of the train had become my natural state, and the thought of stopping, of arriving, of stepping off onto solid, unmoving ground, felt strange and almost unwelcome. I did not want this to end. The realization surprised me. I had somewhere to be, after all. A destination. People waiting for me. Plans for Christmas Day. All of that was still ahead, still real, still important. But in this moment, I did not want to arrive. I wanted to stay here, in this warm cabin, watching the snow slide past my window, listening to the wheels, feeling the gentle rock and sway of the train beneath me. I wanted to remain suspended in this in-between place, this liminal space where nothing was required of me except to be present. It was the same feeling I thought that you might get from a long bath on a winter evening, or from lying in bed on a lazy morning with nowhere you had to be, or from sitting by a fire with a good book and a cup of tea while the rain fell outside. That feeling of being perfectly content, perfectly at peace, wanting nothing more than what you had in that exact moment. But it was more than that too. Because this was not stillness. This was motion. This was active, purposeful movement through space and time. The train was taking me somewhere, carrying me forward with every passing second. And yet, paradoxically, I felt more still inside than I had felt in years. Maybe that was the secret, I thought. Maybe true stillness, true peace, was not about stopping. It was about finding the right rhythm, finding the motion that matched your internal state, that harmonized with something deep inside you. For me tonight, that rhythm was the clickety-clack of train wheels on rails. That rhythm was this steady, unhurried forward progress through the darkness. That rhythm was the swaying of this cabin, the soft vibration rising up through the floor, the occasional gentle lurch as we rounded a curve or crossed a bridge. This was my rhythm, and when I moved at this rhythm, I was at peace. I thought about all the times in my life when I had felt restless, anxious, unable to settle. The times when I had moved too fast or too slow, when I had pushed too hard or not hard enough, when I had been out of sync with myself and with the world around me. Maybe what I had been missing was this sense of being carried, this permission to be in transit, to be between, to not have arrived yet, and to be okay with that. We spend so much energy trying to control our journeys, I thought. Trying to speed them up or slow them down, trying to map every step, trying to guarantee our arrival. We are so focused on the destination that we forget to notice the journey itself, to appreciate the landscape we are passing through, to recognize the beauty of the in-between. But tonight, on this train, I had no control. I could not make it go faster or slower. I could not choose the route or change the destination. All I could do was sit here in my warm cabin and let the train carry me, trusting that it knew where it was going, trusting that I would arrive when I was meant to arrive. And that surrender, that letting go, was where the peace came from. Outside my window, something moved. I sat up straighter, pressing closer to the glass. At first I thought I had imagined it, but then I saw it again. Deer. 3 of them, moving through the snow at the edge of the tree line. Their pale bodies were almost luminous in the moonlight, and they moved with a grace that seemed dreamlike, ethereal. The train was moving too fast for me to watch them for long. They appeared, paused, lifted their heads to look at the passing train, and then disappeared into the darkness behind us. The whole encounter lasted perhaps 5 seconds, but it felt like a gift. A small, perfect gift from the night. A reminder that while I was here in my warm cabin, moving through the darkness, the world outside was alive and awake too. Other creatures were making their own journeys, following their own rhythms, moving through their own in-between places. I was not alone, even in my solitude. I was part of something larger, part of this vast, beautiful, mysterious world that continued on through the darkest hours, through winter and snow and silence, full of its own quiet wonders. The train rolled on. The moon continued its slow descent toward the western horizon. The stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns, and I sat in my cabin, wrapped in my blanket, watching and listening and feeling, and I thought I had never been more awake in my life. Not awake in the sense of alert or energized, but awake in the sense of present, aware, open to what was happening, to what was unfolding moment by moment. Not thinking about the past or planning for the future, but simply being here, now, in this perfect traveling present. This was what it meant to be alive, I thought. This was the heart of it. Not the big moments, not the arrivals or the achievements or the celebrations, but these quiet hours in between. These spaces where nothing much was happening except the steady, patient forward motion of a journey. These were the moments that made up a life. And if we could learn to appreciate them, to find peace in them, to be present for them, then we would never really be anywhere but home. Because home was not a place. Home was this feeling, this sense of being exactly where you were meant to be, even if where you were meant to be was somewhere in the middle, somewhere between, somewhere still in motion. The train swayed gently beneath me. The wheels sang their endless song. The moonlight painted the snow in shades of blue and silver and violet. And I was home. The first hints of dawn arrived so gradually that I almost did not notice them. The sky had been black for so long, deep and star-filled and unchanging, that I had stopped expecting it to change. But now, looking out my window, I saw that the darkness in the east was not quite as deep as it had been. There was a softening there, a barely perceptible lightening of the sky along the horizon. I had not slept. Not really. I had dozed a little, drifting in and out of that twilight state between waking and dreaming. But I had never fully surrendered to sleep. Some part of me had wanted to stay awake, to not miss any of this, to witness every moment of this journey. And now it was nearly morning. Christmas morning. I straightened in my seat and watched the eastern sky. The change was slow, almost imperceptible from minute to minute. But when I looked away and then looked back, I could see the difference. The black was becoming gray. The gray was becoming lighter. A thin line of pale gold appeared along the horizon, growing brighter, spreading upward. The stars began to fade. The moon, which had been so bright and commanding all night, looked suddenly pale and small, its light overtaken by the approaching sun, and the landscape transformed. In the moonlight, everything had been blue and silver and shadow. But now, as dawn arrived, colors began to return to the world. The snow was no longer blue but white, brilliant white, almost painful to look at, as it caught the first rays of the rising sun. The trees took on depth and definition, their bare branches no longer flat black shapes but complex, intricate structures of brown and gray. And the sky filled with color, gold along the horizon, fading up through orange and pink and lavender into the deep blue of the upper atmosphere. It was a watercolor sky, soft and delicate, beautiful in a way that felt almost fragile, as though it might dissolve at any moment. I pressed my face close to the window, not wanting to miss any of it. This was the gift of having stayed awake all night, this privilege of witnessing the transition, of seeing the night give way to day, of watching the world wake up. The train rolled on through the dawn, and I watched the sun rise. It appeared slowly, a thin arc of brilliant gold at first, almost too bright to look at directly, then more of it, rising and rising until the full circle of the sun sat just above the horizon, transforming everything it touched. The fields around us glowed. The snow seemed to be lit from within, radiating light back at the sky. The shadows of trees stretched long across the white, sharp and defined. Steam rose from the roofs of distant barns, visible for the first time in the growing light. We were in farmland now, I realized, passing through rural country, through a landscape of fields and fence lines, and the occasional cluster of buildings. A truck sat parked near a barn, and as we passed, I saw a farmer climbing out, beginning his morning chores. He did not look up at the train, and I wondered if he even noticed us passing, or if we were just another sound in his morning, familiar and unremarkable. But to me, from inside this warm cabin, he was part of the magic, part of this Christmas morning unfolding all around me. The conductor's voice came over the intercom again, and I smiled at the sound of it, that warm, unhurried voice that I had come to appreciate over the course of the night. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is your conductor speaking. I hope you all had a restful night. We are currently about 40 minutes outside of the city, and we will be arriving at the central station on schedule at 7 a.m. The dining car will be opening shortly for breakfast service, or you are welcome to remain in your cabins until we arrive. On behalf of all of us aboard the Christmas Eve Express, I want to wish you a very Merry Christmas. It has been our pleasure to have you with us on this journey. Thank you for choosing to travel with us tonight. There was a pause, and then he added in a slightly more personal tone, This has been a special run, folks. Quiet and peaceful and just about perfect. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. Safe travels to all of you. I felt a lump form in my throat, unexpected and sudden. There was something in his voice, some warmth and genuine affection that moved me. He had meant it. This had been special to him too. And it struck me then that he must make this run often, perhaps every week or even every night. This was his work, his routine. But he had not let it become routine. He had not let the repetition dull his appreciation for the beauty of it, for the privilege of carrying people safely through the night, of being part of their journeys. He had treated this nearly empty train on Christmas Eve with the same care and attention he would have given to a full train on any other night. He had made his announcements with the same formality, the same warmth. He had checked on his passengers with the same diligence. He had shown up fully for his work, even when there was almost no one there to notice. There was a lesson in that too, I thought. A lesson about showing up, about doing your work with care and attention regardless of whether anyone was watching, regardless of whether you were appreciated or acknowledged. About finding meaning in the work itself, in the doing of it well, rather than in the recognition or reward. The conductor loved this train, that much was clear, and because he loved it, he made it a place where others could find peace and comfort and a kind of magic. I made a mental note to thank him when we arrived, to tell him what this night had meant to me, but I also knew that words would not be quite adequate. How could I explain what had happened inside me over the course of these 10 hours? How could I convey the shift, the opening, the understanding that had grown in me? Maybe I could not. Maybe some experiences were too personal, too internal, to be fully communicated. But I could at least tell him that it had been special, that I had noticed, that I was grateful. Outside, the landscape was fully illuminated now. The sun had cleared the horizon, and its light flooded across the snow, making everything brilliant and clear. I could see for miles in every direction. Fields and farms and small towns, roads cutting through the white, smoke rising from chimneys as people woke to Christmas morning. The world was waking up, and I was arriving. I felt a pang at that thought, a small sadness. I was not ready for this to end. I wanted to stay on this train, to keep moving through the landscape, to remain in this liminal space where I had found such unexpected peace. But of course, that was not possible. Journeys ended. Trains arrived at their destinations. That was the nature of things. The in-between could not last forever. Eventually, you had to step off onto solid ground again, had to resume your regular life, had to return to the world of responsibilities and schedules and all the things that pulled you away from presence. But maybe, and this thought came to me with a kind of quiet certainty, maybe I did not have to lose what I had found here. Maybe I could carry it with me. Maybe the rhythm of the train, the peace of the journey, the understanding of the in-between, maybe all of that could come with me when I stepped off this train and back into my life. Maybe I could remember, in the busy days ahead, that peace was not always about arriving. That sometimes the most important thing was simply to be present in whatever space I found myself, to find the rhythm that matched my internal state, to trust the journey even when I could not see the destination. Maybe I could learn to be more comfortable with the in-between places in my life, the transitions and the uncertainties and the times when I did not know exactly where I was going or what would happen next. Maybe I could learn to see those times not as problems to be solved, but as their own kind of gift, their own kind of home. The train began to slow. I could feel it in the rhythm of the wheels, in the way the clickety-clack stretched out slightly, the beats coming a fraction slower. We were entering the outskirts of the city now. Buildings appeared alongside the tracks, warehouses and industrial structures at first, then neighborhoods, houses with Christmas lights still glowing in the morning light. I stood and folded the blanket carefully, placing it back at the foot of the sleeping berth. I had not used the berth itself. I had spent the entire night in the green velvet seat, watching the world go by, listening to the wheels. But the blanket had been a comfort, and I arranged it neatly now, a small gesture of care for the next person who would occupy this cabin. I gathered my few belongings, pulled on my coat. The cabin suddenly felt smaller, or perhaps I felt larger, more solid, as I prepared to step back into the world. The train slowed further. We were in the heart of the city now, moving through the urban landscape at a crawl. I could see cars on the streets, people walking on the sidewalks, the ordinary life of a city on Christmas morning. Stores were closed, their windows dark, but here and there a coffee shop was open, its lights warm and inviting. And then I saw the station ahead, a grand old building of stone and glass, its platform stretching out beneath a high arched roof. The Christmas Eve express rolled slowly, carefully into the station, the wheels changing their tune as we moved from main line to the switching yard. clickety-clack giving way to a different rhythm, slower and more deliberate. We glided alongside a platform. A few people stood waiting, wrapped in coats, their breath visible in the cold morning air. They looked expectant, eager, ready to greet whoever was arriving on this train. The train came to a stop. After 10 hours of constant motion, the sudden stillness felt strange, almost unsettling. My body still expected the sway and rock of the journey. I took a deep breath and picked up my bag. The corridor outside my cabin was no longer empty. The other passengers were emerging now, gathering their belongings, preparing to disembark. I saw the elderly woman from the dining car, moving slowly but steadily, a small suitcase in her hand. The couple I had seen together, smiling and speaking quietly to one another. The man who had been reading. We exchanged nods, small acknowledgments of our shared journey, but no words. We were still, in some sense, holding the quiet of the night, not quite ready to break the spell. I made my way toward the exit. The conductor stood there, just as he had stood there when I boarded, helping passengers down onto the platform. When I reached him, I paused. "Thank you," I said, "for everything." This was I stopped, not sure how to finish the sentence. This was what? Life-changing? Magical? A gift? He seemed to understand without my needing to explain. His eyes were kind, knowing. "You're very welcome," he said. "It was our pleasure to have you aboard. Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas," I said. I stepped down onto the platform. The ground felt solid and unmoving beneath my feet, strange after so many hours of motion. The cold morning air hit my face crisp and clean. I stood there for a moment, my bag at my feet, and I looked back at the train.